What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Debbie Rao YouTube channel. We're back with one of my favorite series we've been doing here on the channel, and that's Reading the Room. And today we're going to be looking at an underrated wide receiver room, one that I think can challenge as a top 5 group in the country, probably the most talented they've been in a long time. And that's the Oregon wide receiver room. There's a ton of talent in here. So like everything that we do on these, we break down the offense. What can we expect, especially from their new offensive coordinator? We go through the depth chart. We look at almost every player in the roster and what we can expect for them. And we kind of give you guys a preview of this. And so we're going to be diving in the Oregon wide receiver room after the intro. So hit that like and subscribe button and you'll get me on the other side. All right, you know what time it is. Has to put my boy Troy Franklin on here. So before I get all the haters out there from Oregon, Oregon fans are kind of ruthless. I love Troy Franklin. So let's put that out front before we get into kind of areas that he needs to improve. But before we get into that, let's look at 2022 in terms of this offense. 33 points per game. Total offense was at about 412 yards per game at 35th in the country. Overall, you'll see that. Plays per game was there. Passing attempts. Pretty, middle of the pack, but a very efficient offense. What you saw last year. And they did very well. And I think the biggest thing is we saw Kenny Dillingham, who is now the Arizona State coach, really work with and develop Bo Nix. And that was the big thing, right? Bo came out 3,500 yards, 29 touchdowns. We obviously saw the rushing upside with him, but he developed as a passer. And I think the big thing with this offense is moving forward is what does this offense look without Dillingham, right? What is that going to look like? But also in general, like this room is more talented than last year's room. They lost Dante Thornton. They lost some other players from that team, but what they added and some of the freshmen they got coming in, especially Jurrion Dickey, we're talking about an elite group right now. Now, let's get into their offensive coordinator, Will Stein. So Will Stein's coming over from UTSA. While at UTSA, you saw him develop a great offense, right? So when we're talking about he was at Texas San Antonio, the Roadrunners averaged 38 points per season, essentially. They were 11-2 last year. So you saw that. Also, Stein has talked about this offseason that Oregon's offense they ran last year is essentially pretty close to what he runs, right? And he ran at UTSA. So, when we're thinking of like Bo Nix's development, these receivers' development, everything is pretty close to going to stay the same. And it seems like they're getting a lot of work in, especially over the spring. You like that. I think the big thing that you like, first, the scheme's going to pretty much stay pretty close to what it was, right? Quarterback development. What he was able to do with Frank Harris, at UTSA, he averaged 300 yards per game, about 71% of his passes. That's a big part of this. Hey, can Bo develop? And then Austin Novosad, if you want to see what Novosad is going to look like, I did a video a while ago on that. I've also done a video on Bo Nix, looking at him and whether he's going to be the Heisman, right? So when you're thinking of what Stein can do, he can develop this quarterback position really, really well. And then I think at the wide receiver position, the area that we're going to focus on today, he's done a great job. They've broken records at UTSA, and they were one of the best groups in 2021. They had Joshua Cephas, DeCorian Clark, and Franklin was there as well. And when you're looking at overall Zachary Franklin, who's now, when we think about Zachary going to Ole Miss, they did very, very well, right? They were only 3 teams to have 3 receivers with 50 receptions, 750 yards. That's really good. And then in 2022, Cephas and Franklin had over 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. So we know he's going to develop, right? So we've seen that development. And I think that's one of the areas that they hit this out of the park. They lost Dillingham, but they get in Will Stein, who's going to do a great job at Oregon. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been able to kind of get the recruits that they're being able to do because, hey, got to get that first round. Will they get a first round wide receiver? I think that's the question mark. Now, let's dive into this depth chart. So first is my guy, Troy Franklin. He's out here from California. He was a 4-star prospect, wide receiver 3 of the class. I have liked Troy since the beginning. I'm glad last year you really saw him kind of get a cohesiveness with Bo Nix. So he had 61 receptions, 891 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He really developed as a receiver. And I think there's areas of his game that he definitely developed. So let's talk about his strengths. I think his yak has always been there, right? I think that he has the ability to break it deep. You saw multiple times last year where he had that. And I think one thing that his development did, and I think the biggest thing that I saw from his freshman year to his sophomore year, he always was a deep threat, right? He's always that guy that's going to go get out there. And you're kind of nervous his freshman year because there was games where it's like, hey, he had 2 catches, 80 yards, but is that all he's going to be, right? Then you fast forward it to this sophomore year. So you see what he had. there were games where, yeah, he was 5 for 139 and a touchdown against Washington. But then, hey, 8 catches for 78 yards against Oregon State, and he did the little things, right? That UCLA game in Washington was his best game, but then he also can be that explosive guy, that deep threat yak guy, like against Washington State, 5 catches, 137 yards. He showed at times that he is no longer just that deep threat, 3 catch, 80 a touchdown. He can be consistently like that guy that kind of goes and gets balls, right? Earns targets, does those things. That was a very, very good improvement for Troy. Route running is also really good. I thought he did a great job last year of really developing his route running, comeback routes, ability to go over the middle, little things that he didn't do his freshman year. He developed better than any receiver I did. I'm so happy for him that he developed into the receiver he is, because I do think he's talented enough to be the wide receiver 3 or 4 of the class, of the 24 class, if he can continue that development. Now, areas that we want to see him continue on. I think consistent hands. I thought he improved a lot his sophomore year. So I'm not saying that he doesn't have good hands. I think he does. Freshman, even from his senior year of high school, areas of that I've watched for a long time, inconsistency can play a role in those hands. But last year, he didn't really drop anything. So the hope is he continues to improve it, right? These aren't weaknesses. It's just, hey, let's see those hands again this year. And if we can hit those drop numbers that we don't, that we want to see from PFFs and the grades, we'll be excited for Troy there. Speed, and again, I'm going to have people in the comments saying he is fast. I know he is fast, but when we're trying to project it over to like NFL status, is he a 4.5 guy, or can he get in the 4.4 range, right? Where is that going to be? And I think that's where I'm looking at in terms of just his NFL prospects. Can he get in that 4.5 territory, or even 4.4? And then the size thing is something that he's definitely worked on. I think he's probably at 170 his freshman year, probably put on 8 to 10 pounds his sophomore year. Can he get a little bit bigger, right, in terms of that size, put on that weight a little bit, maybe 185, right? I don't know if he necessarily has to, but get some strength in there. If he continues on that, you're going to notice this. Those areas of improvement are going to get, they're done, right? So we're going to see strengths rather than those areas that he needs to work on. Now, after that, we got Kris Hutson. I think people forget that Kris Hutson, he was a solid prospect coming out, 4-star kid. He's been very solid for them, right? So when we're talking about Kris Hutson, you'll see it here. Just consistent. Last 2 years, 30 catches, 44, 419 yards, 472. The touchdowns will come. But Hutson, it gives them that veteran presence. I really feel like, with a 4th-year kid coming in here, he's definitely going to have that chemistry with Bo Nix. There is something with Hutson there. He kind of reminds you, like, if you watch the Texas video, Jordan Whittington, right? So a guy that's just going to be able to be versatile, play inside and out, right? So when you're thinking of him, he's explosive. I really like his explosiveness. They have a very good mix on this depth chart of explosion and deep threats and possession guys. They've done an amazing job building this depth chart and roster. I think that's the best thing that I can say about this coaching staff in general. He's explosive. He's versatile. I do think he can play in the slot. He might move in there depending on how their matchups go. Right now, we have him slotted on the outside. So when we're thinking of like how this kind of projects, X is the Franklin, Z is Hutson, and in slot, we'll get into Tez here in a little bit. But he can mix and match, right? So like if Trayshawn Holden's out there, maybe they move Hutson to the slot, and then you have a pretty good 3 set there. And in the 4 set that they run as well, he's versatile. He can do it all. And I think that sets him apart from some of these other guys. And he's got the speed. Hudson's, you're never going to say he's slow, because he definitely has that. Now, areas of improvement, frame. I mean, he's not a bigger guy. From an NFL standpoint, what does that look like? Can he get jammed off the line? Those things. I think if he doesn't play in a slot, he's going to have to face a little bit more press coverage. How does he kind of react to that? Catching traffic, I think he can get better there. I think there's some inconsistencies over the middle. There's little areas of his game that he can get better there. And in strength, overall, it's the same thing, right? Frame, strength. Can he build that going forward? Now, next kid on the list is Tez Johnson, transfer from Troy. So 3-star kid, he developed, right? Wide receiver 275 3 years ago. Now he's going to Oregon. He's a smaller guy, right? 5'10", 150. So we're talking a little guy here. He's going to be in the slot, can create separation. I think he fits this roster really well. You saw him in the spring game. He played pretty well there. I think he's going to earn targets, because I think he can be that go-to guy that just creates separation. And especially in this conference, he could be a playmaker, right? So, you'll see the numbers there, pretty consistent the last few years at Troy. But again, you're thinking of what he does well. Speed, man. I mean, I think that they can space these guys out really well, and I think that's where Stein's going to come in as a coach. He's going to know how to get these guys open in space. He did it at UTSA. He's going to be able to do it at Oregon. The slot ability, I think that he has that. I think he's going to be their slot guy. And he's going to put pressure on defenses, moving him in and out of the, even wide too. He move him inside. Not a lot of safeties and linebackers are going to be able to, cover this kid. Corners probably will, strength-wise, will do that. But then if you really designate a corner or one of your top guys on Tez, you got Troy Franklin on the outside and some of these other guys too. It's going to be hard to defend these guys. And I think he's the game changer, right? I think Franklin and those other guys can definitely do it too, but he's the guy that's going to take a 5-yard slant for a 50-yard touchdown, right? So Tez is that dude that's really going to elevate himself and elevate this offense. Now, couldn't get out of here without talking about, when you talk about like his areas of improvement as well. Frame is never, he's a 150, right? So I don't think that the size thing is going to be there. That's just who he is, right? And he's stayed healthy the last couple of years. G5 to Power 5 is always the question mark for areas of improvement. Like, what does that look like? And I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't sit here, because I have always, Devontae Walker, some of these other guys that we've talked about. It's going to take some adjustment period. But I do think having that kind of familiarity with this type of offense that he ran at Troy, here at Oregon, with Stein, these different groups, I think it's going to be less of a burden for him to do that. And we're just looking for him to make big plays, right? We're not necessarily projecting draft capital for Tez. And then I think bump coverage, those type of things. Like, I think that it's going to be hard for guys to get him off the line because he's so quick and he can create that separation. But if he does get jammed, how does he kind of interact? I think that's something to look at. And then Jurrion Dickey. So Jurrion's one of these guys, when you're talking about him, wide receiver 2 of the class. This is one of the highest ranked wide receivers that go to Oregon. Last year, he was banged up, only played 4 games, but he still had 20 catches for 453 yards and 6 touchdowns, 25.8 yards reception. This kid is fun. You know why? Because he plays both sides of the ball, and I'm old, and I like that shit. That's really the reality. Like, I love Dickey. I love the way he plays. I've comped him to Dez Bryant. So me, as a Cowboy fan, but also just as someone that watched him play. Like, I know people put A.J. Brown, I think 247 Sports has that. I've seen that comp a lot. He reminds me of Dez, man. Like, and I think he's just that guy when you're thinking of just dude. He's just a dude. He's a gamer, right? He's athletic. He can get out there and play. He was not an early enrollee, so it's going to take some time to get out there. But I think he can get on that field and he can just go. Catch radius, gets up and gets it. Like, you watch his high school tape, it's phenomenal, right? The stuff that he can do on that field. Got good hands. I think he's very consistent there, especially from high school. It's hard to judge because when you watch him in high school tape, he's doing it against little guys, right? Like, he is such a man amongst boys out there that it is something that you're going to have to know. Like, hey, moving forward, what is that going to look like at the Division I level? Is he ready? Or is he ready to go? And I think he can be. I think he's so athletic that he's going to be able to get on that field. From like areas of improvement, what's his top end speed? I think that's the question. You're looking through it. Not a ton of verified, numbers out there for him. He did deal with some injuries. I think that's just the way he plays. So that's something to note. Like, if he's just going to play that hard, do these type of things, he is going to get a little bit banged up. I think that's something that he's going to have to improve his lower body strength. He's going to have to improve his upper body strength in the weight room. And that's the scary thing. He might not even be close to what he is physically, right? After a year in an Oregon weight room. So that's something to like, oh my gosh, this kid could be really good. Route running too. I don't think he's very nuanced there. A lot of it's just get this kid the ball and he's going to run your ass over. So I think that over time, but I think the thing that I like the most is that Troy Franklin needed that too. And look what Troy's doing now. So I do think that he's coming in, but he's coming in as a number 2 receiver. This kid is one of the best in his class. And so that's exciting for Oregon fans. You can be excited about some wide receiver room. Now, other guys out here, I really like Kyler Casper. I know the coaching staff likes him. He's someone that keeps popping up all the time when I'm reading and I'm just listening to it. They like him. They thought he developed really well last year. Obviously redshirted, 6'5", 195, put on some weight. And he's got that it factor they talk about. The coaches said they really like his ability to kind of, be a team player, but he knows the offense really well. I think he's going to push Dickey and these other guys in here. And it would not shock me to see Casper really step up in this room and be like, oh, wow, Casper, 5 catches, 50 yards, got on the field. So Casper's a guy for me out there. If you're looking for that, maybe that sleeper, right? That's a guy to really kind of note. Other guys here, Trayshawn Holden, transfer from Alabama. Holden was when you're looking at him, wide receiver 33, came in as he's a very solid wide receiver. He got a little bit of trouble this offseason, well, but he's back. I think Holden can definitely be a solid piece for them. Like, going to Alabama, didn't get a run as he probably wanted, didn't step up in that room when they needed someone last year, scored 6 touchdowns. So that's nothing to sneeze at there. I think that he's a very solid guy. I think he provides a good depth at the position. I think he can play Z. So if he's out there, maybe behind Hutson, puts him in that area of like an area of need for them. I think that's why they went out and got him. So Trayshawn Holden sitting there, I think 4-star kid again, 4 and 5 stars all around this area. You're going to really see now that they built up this room. Next guy that I think is a sleeper in terms of who they grabbed, Gary Bryant Jr. from USC. People forget this kid was the wide receiver 8 of his class. I think that was one of the best transfers they got. I know Tez is there, but I think Gary can definitely play in the slot as well. He gives this offense an even more, better dynamic. Imagine defenses trying to guard Franklin, Dickey, Hutson, Holden, Bryant, Tez, just out there, right? And then you throw in Casper and some of these other guys. Not to mention, we haven't even talked about the running back room who can catch passes. Bucky, Noah, those guys. Maybe Jurrion James gets out there. Like, this is a loaded wide receiver room, and Gary Bryant gives this offense a different dynamic, right? It would not shock me to see Oregon being a top 3 offense in the country. That's I think their ceiling. I think they really can get in there because of this room and the talent they have around these guys. Recruits on here, I didn't put Dickey on there, so before you start yelling at me in the comments there, because I already talked about him. Ashton Kozer's another guy, wide receiver 31. He'll probably redshirt just based on the talent they have in there, but 6'3", 193, he's a bigger kid, and he probably fits into that Z counter when like Hutson leaves or Holden or whatever the case may be there. I think he's going to fit in really well, but he's a fun prospect. You should go watch him. That's someone else they got coming. Now, as far as their offensive outlook, what are we talking about here? Bo Nix is the quarterback. We know that. He's in a Heisman. I think he's a Heisman candidate. Go watch the video on Bo Nix. I did an entire breakdown of him. Ty Thompson is in there and Austin Novosad. I think Ty is definitely a good backup in that room. Novosad is definitely the recruit they got from Texas this last year. He's someone to kind of watch. The running back room is talented. Bucky Irving is definitely in. There's a possibility Bucky's going to get day 2 capital if he declares after this year. Noah Whittington is a very solid receiving back as well. Jordan James and Dante Dowdle. I think Dante is one of those guys that people are really talking about as getting some run. They like Jordan James. They liked what they saw from him in the spring. Jaden Lemur is another one, the 2026 kid. I like him as well. That running back room is very talented. It might be top to bottom one of the more talented backfields that Oregon has definitely put out there. Tight ends, Terrence Ferguson is a solid tight end. Patrick Herbert, very solid tight end. Kenyon Sadiq as well, 26 class area there. Those 3 guys are definitely shoring up. Malaka Matevo, he transferred to UCLA, but that tight end room is very solid too. Again, this offense it should challenge USC as one of the top offenses in this conference and in national, like the national, just the national offense out there in terms of the top guys in the NCAA. Like, they are that good and they're that talented, and they go with Bo Nix. But I do think with Ty Thompson's experience now, with Austin Novosad being there, like, if something was to happen to Bo Nix, I do think Thompson can kind of step in and at least be a game manager, push the ball around to guys that he needs to know. And I don't think they take a huge dip. I do think that they still be competitive, which is good. Now, who's my prediction is going to lead this run? It's Troy Franklin. Got to give my shout out to Troy Franklin. I think that he could jump up and maybe be that guy that we're talking about being the wide receiver 3 of this class. He's improved. He's gotten there. I think he's going to hit over that 1,000-yard mark. And I think Oregon fans should be very excited for the kid because of what he brought to the table. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button. We got college football soon. If you haven't already, go check out the top 25 breakdowns that me and Christian Williams are doing here on the channel, going through every top 25 team, full depth chart breakdowns. It's been a lot of fun recording those. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button. If you really like college football, go check out our Patreon. You can see it below. $3 a month for all kinds of things. And we have a big manifesto update that just dropped. So appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys next time.